See, compromise is a heavy trip. You can't change it. You can't get him to be comfortable with giving her affection on her terms, because it's not going to work. You can't change these things. So either she's able to deal with it, either she's able to say, all right, there's a place for me to compromise to your social environment. There's a place for me where I have to compromise to the nature of the affection that you can give me. But I don't want to be the only limitation in my life. In other words, I'm going to have freedom from you to be able to have my own companions and friends. I'm going to have the freedom from you to deny giving you access to me, to your associates, when I don't feel like it. That I cannot be just compelled into that. Now, the moment that the partners understand the mechanic and how that works, they can begin to experiment with that and see that it's valid for them. In other words, she can begin to experiment with seeking out her own friendships. And he can begin the experiment of seeing if he can let go of that. If he can let go of allowing her to do that. But this is the place where they're going to have all of their difficulties. And from all of the descriptions of what her life was like at the end, this was a very lonely being. This was somebody that was deeply isolated and very depressed. The fact of the matter is that what happens to you in that kind of a situation is that you compromise yourself into a black hole. There was no way out. There was nobody she could talk to. There was nobody she could confide in. All of that stuff, was lost. No, it's, again, this is not blame, but it is lack of awareness. If you don't understand what you're involved with, then what to do. I know in my relationships that are important to me, my close relationships, where the compromise is. I'm always aware of it. Not simply the compromise that I compromise to, but the compromises I create because I'm so defined. If you step into my life with all of my fixedness, you're bound to hit compromises with me. If I'm not sensitive to that, I don't understand what's going on in the other person, I'm not respecting them properly. It's something that we all have to recognize. And in my relationship with the other, when I have to compromise to them, I go through a very clear process within myself of recognizing it. I have a lot of business dealings. I deal with a lot of people in a lot of situations. And I bring their chart up on screen to remind myself of what's going on between the two of us. Where are those soft places? Where are the problems? Where is the spark that still keeps us together? All of those things. And it doesn't matter at what level, whether that's friendship or business or whatever.